Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jeff Odgers, Chair of the Dairy Australia Board. Thank you very much for coming today. I appreciate your attendance in the lead up to Christmas at what's a very busy time of the season for farmers and for industry representatives alike. I would like to start by officially noting that a quorum is present, either in person or by proxy, and so I declare open the 2018 Annual General Meeting of Dairy Australia. The notice of meeting for today's event has been given in accordance with Dairy Australia's Constitution, and copies of both the Notice of Constitution, the Notice and the Constitution are available at the registration desk outside. I'll take the notice of meeting as read. Before I go any further, I would be grateful if you could all please check that your mobile phones are switched off. I also note that no unauthorised recordings of this meeting are allowed today. I encourage all members to join our discussions and to ask questions. You can ask questions from the audience with the microphone provided. We will address your questions in the official part of the meeting and in the discussion session towards the end of the meeting. I'd like to introduce my fellow directors and Company Secretary. So from my far right, Professor Paul Wood, AO, Mr Graham Nicol, Mr James Mann, who is standing for election to the board again today, Mr David Mallinson, who is retiring from the board today, and Mrs Tanya Luckin. To my left, our Managing Director, Dr David Nation, our Company Secretary, Emma Braun, Mrs Jan West AM, Chair of the Audit and Risk Management Committee, and Mr John McKillop, Chair of the Human Resources Committee, who retires from the board at the end of today. Members of Dairy Australia's leadership team are seated in the front row. Before we go to the formal parts of today's AGM, I would like to acknowledge some current challenges and discuss setting this industry up for the future. We will then address the formal parts of the meeting before our new Managing Director, David Nation, says a few words. Let me begin by saying I feel privileged to be addressing you today as the Chair of Dairy Australia and a representative of an industry with a proud history. But as you all know, Australia's dairy industry is currently going through an especially difficult period. In recent years, we've experienced market disruption and increased volatility in those markets. Now, 3.5-year commodity cycles with greater swings. At the same time, climate change and variability have impacted seasons and farm performance. The timing of the current drought hitting most of the eastern states is particularly hard. And so for individual dairy businesses, it has been a difficult period with a number hit by market and climate shocks. In addition, rising input costs have eroded margins. And given these events, some are questioning their future and industry momentum. Global dairy demand has remained robust, with dairy exports from the 6 major exporters increasing 3.7% over the past 12 months in what is a supply-driven market. Australia exported 841,000 tonnes of dairy last year, but also imported 335,000 tonnes of products. We are a trading nation, immersed in the global market, which means, as we said at the breakfast this morning, Earl Rattray emphasised it, it means that performance, competitiveness and relevance is critical right through our whole supply chain. At home here in Australia, national consumption of milk and cheese is growing annually in line with population growth, albeit though in a time of highly competitive supermarkets and highly engaged and discerning consumers. So these are the dynamics. There is opportunity for Australian dairy, but if we really want a strong future, we're going to have to continue to work for it, and we're going to have to continue to pursue it in a time when the rate of change is more and more rapid. Internationally renowned motivational speaker Kayla Colbin gave the keynote speech at this year's Australian Dairy Conference, saying, "We can no longer use the past as a predictor of the future." I found that really profound at the time. And then she went on to say that in reference to adapting, convincing people regarding making that change is the challenge. Ladies and gentlemen, I think the reality is we as an industry are facing a new era. We need to not only understand our new operating environment better, we also need to navigate it better as well. Our dairy communities have been marvellously resilient. But I can see that some of you may ask, why? Why stay? And I can't answer that for each individual farmer, but I know why I stay. I love having my own business, working beside the next generation, building for the future in a regional community, as many of you do. We've invested a lot over the years, and I sometimes challenge people, where else in the world would they set themselves up in dairy farming, other than in Australia, if you look at all the facts? And they usually agree. We have a temperate climate suitable for grazing cows. We have cheap land relative to productive capacity. We have a range of options around purchase feed. Now, not this year, but usually at competitive prices. And we generally have a low cost of capital. In this country, there is reward for working hard and working smart, providing scope and choice around investing and growing dairy businesses in a very stable economy. And additionally, Australia's dairy community has always supported each other. Our farmers are able to access many resources available to them, such as the service provided through our regional development programs. In many Australian regions, there are also options around which milk company farmers choose to supply. And if we want to be honest about it, there's real competition for that milk. Processors are investing heavily in capacity, new product and channel development. It's ongoing. As a collective, they are currently seeking over 1 billion litres of new milk. So the industry needs to find ways to work effectively with processors. It also needs to focus on how we might achieve further innovation and value creation elsewhere in both the domestic, I think particularly in the domestic, and in export markets. So, I really do believe there are reasons to be positive about Australian dairy. There are prizes worth pursuing. We do have strengths to build on, and as Kayla Colbin said, thinking about and convincing people about making change is the challenge, because the goalposts do keep moving, ladies and gentlemen. Dairy Australia, and I include the 8 regional development programs here, is your organisation. And over the years, our remit has been to lead on further enabling farmers through relevant research, insights, tools and services. And so I just want to touch on a couple of points here. In terms of our three strategic priorities, Dairy Australia spends over 80% of its program budget on farm-related initiatives. Farmers do continue to adapt and evolve their systems. But greater rates of adoption where farmers can invest, and I know farmers have been struggling to do that, can still make a significant difference. Given that, Dairy Australia is heavily focused on how we can increase adoption. And we're heavily focused on doing that with tailored services for all farmers. And this increasingly based on farmers' feedback, responding to farmers' preferences, their business needs and their future goals as individuals. Just moving on, I also want to touch on the promise offered by Dairy Feedbase. Now, we heard about it this morning, Australia's operating environment, climatics, flat curves, etc. But look, we must, first of all, optimise homegrown feed in this country. I think we agree on that. We also have to learn how to integrate supplements and how to get real animal performance across a range of regions. In terms of global dairy production systems, I'm talking about the range of middle ground systems, the space between purely grazing and housed total mixed ration systems. Australia must endeavour to own and deliver competitive advantage in that middle ground space. And we must endeavour to do that better than any other dairy country, because that's our place. And Dairy Feedbase will be further enabled by an ag tech component in the digital age. And it is the program that will take us to that expertise and excellence in that middle ground. Finally, Datagene. Several years of work on rebuilding the infrastructure for genetic evaluation and herd improvement are really coming to fruition. And I want to congratulate everyone that's been involved. The herd improvement sector today is cohesive, and it's aligned on success. Datagene demonstrates what can be achieved by genuine collaboration. And it's an exemplar. As we contemplate working on the Australian Dairy Plan next year, it shows us so much about how we should go about it and what we might achieve together. Regarding the Australian Dairy Plan, and Terry kicked it off this morning, this industry needs to get closer together and think through the issues and the opportunities that really matter, and then get aligned on how we're going to sort them out and who's going to take responsibility. Dairy Plan is an opportunity to create a blueprint which positions the various parts of industry to operate within an overarching whole of industry strategy with a renewed sense of purpose and agreed direction. This is a new concept in really broad planning for our extended dairy community, and it will set the course, as Terry said, for the next 5 years and beyond. Dairy Australia is committing to be part of that. We will be listening, and we will be listening hard to all of you. And I want to really stress that the Dairy Plan is bigger than any one industry body. Clive Noble told me this on the way in. Again, thanks, Clive. But it ultimately needs to represent the views of everyone here. All of the organisations committing to the Dairy Plan are focused on making it as easy as possible for farmers to have input through regional and state-based workshops. At the same time, workshops with stakeholders such as processors, government and industry bodies will also take place. The purpose of the plan will be to chart the course of how we all navigate the immediate, medium and the long-term future. This means that stakeholders can have clear objectives, and the process will include measurable goals to plot how we're going along the way. this process will inject the plan with an appropriate sense of urgency. We have to get on with this. Dairy Australia, I individually want to see farmers confident and continuing to look to the future. I am fully committed to helping to create the best possible dairy industry. I know the entire board of Dairy Australia is just as committed. Our goal is a strong and united dairy industry. In conclusion, I want to thank dairy farmers from across the country for your support of Dairy Australia. I would also like to add that I am heartened by the continued backing we receive from consumers who, in growing numbers, buy our dairy products and rally behind our agricultural communities. Our partnership with the Australian Government is also greatly appreciated. Dairy Australia's role is more than just a national services body investing in research and development, education, skills and support programs, industry promotion, data and trade relations. Although we do all of that, we are also uniquely placed to help maintain and create strong relationships and bring the industry together. Innovation is necessary to keep us ahead of the game. I think we all know that. However, it's not enough with the challenges we face now. It's actually the relationships we form and maintain today that will keep us a robust industry now and into the future. We have to keep talking to each other. There will always be issues to resolve. It's a matter of how we work through them and play to our strengths, because we do have strengths. I would just like to conclude by acknowledging and thanking, I shook hands with him a few minutes ago, the previous chair, Jeff Akers. Jeff, thank you for your hard work over the last 4 years. And I also want to acknowledge Ian Halliday. He can't be here with us today, who held the Managing Director's position at Dairy Australia for much of Jeff's time. He was in the role for 9 years. Many of us knew him well. I think we should acknowledge his significant contribution. So thank you.